Hey everybody, and welcome back to Old Bearded Gaming. We've got something just absolutely amazing for you, the much anticipated 1.18 update of Vault Hunters. We just spent 100 days in the new update, and we've compiled it all for your viewing pleasure. Thanks for checking out Old Bearded Gaming. Welcome aboard for the ride. Let's get into the world. Now, like many Vault Hunters, when the 1.118 update dropped, we all spent a long time trying to configure our systems to be able to allow the game to run smoothly. Being fans and previous users of Optifine, it was no longer an option. It was incompatible with this mod pack. And as you can see, things are a little kind of fuzzy and blurry. That's because we spent 3 days prior to the day one filming of this messing around with settings, trying different mods, trying different configurations to try to get something that was stable, had enough FPS, and could actually work. That included a lot of changes to both the PC video card settings. I know it looks rough, but I promise it does get better, everybody. Trust me. Not gonna lie, day one was a little bit rough, and as we get ready to bring it to an end, finally finding a village here where we can go inside, rest our head, hopefully recover a little bit of hit points. Rough not only in the sense of all that we accomplished, which you can see in the achievements there in the chat, but the pixelization's still there. And day two would prove to be no better. Still blurry as all get out. At least there were snacks now. And there were a couple fun little flavor items, like these little pots with stuff in them. That's cool. Or this really neat bell tower with really good loot for early game. I'll take it. Not one to turn down free goodies. Pro tip, take the bell with you. Save yourself a trip for later when the Vault Altar asks for it. We'd also find a bundle, and man, these things are a great addition. Would have been really handy to have something like this in 1.16, but the bundle is the gateway to pouches later on. And of course we check out the changes to Easy Villager. We can still just walk around, shake hands, and make new friends. The benefit is they're quiet now after you pick them up. I love it. Day 3 would come along and we'd head out across the water to this other village we found on the map. Sadly, this one was just a regular village. Nothing fun, unique, or cool inside of this one. But there were a lot of villagers. We'll remember that for later. And of course, Iron Golem. It's easy iron in the early game, so why not? They're not going to need them. We turn our sights to exploration and head on out into the great unknown. Camp out for the night under the stars and get ready for day 4. We'd build ourselves a little cache to store some goodies so we can go load up on even more goodies. We had spied this little mine shaft entrance from the coastline and decided to go give it a little bit of a peek. We'd spend a couple days going through, cleaning it out. Obviously there's a spawner in here. We'd end up finding even another spawner. We'd go ahead and keep this one intact, mark it up, and set a waypoint on the minimap as you do, just so that we know we can come back to it if need be. This would actually turn out to be completely irrelevant and unnecessary because these things are everywhere. I think I've got about 6 or 7 of them currently marked, and that's just immediately around our base. Speaking of which, I found a spot to go ahead and set up a base. We've got a beautiful underwater cavern there that we would come back and explore later, or at least I had intentions to do so. I didn't actually end up doing it, because we ended up finding out where it all led to inside of this massive mine shaft. Despite the blurriness, check out that mini-map. Look at the extensiveness, and this goes down for layers and layers. As it was, this massive cavern here immediately spoke out to me as this is where we need to set up our home base. Because, 1, I didn't have to dig it out, and 2, there's so much great stuff going on in this mine shaft, we might as well just go ahead and call this place home. We'd play a little bit of inventory manager, as one does, there's just really no way around that, and work on getting this space set up to be habitable. I will say so far, the resources have been kind of pouring in. It really has not been difficult to acquire what I consider to be a little bit of wealth and some goodies that'll help us out later on. We're on day 9 and we'll spend a couple days going through just exploring all of these mine shafts. I mean, how could you not? And part of that exploration is making sure things stay safe. Check out this pro move here. Yeah, this is going to go exactly how I wanted it to. Oh yeah. Oh yeah, did you happen to notice? I fixed the blurriness. Oh my gosh, that took way too long to try to adjust all these settings. If you're interested in how we did it, check out the description of this video. I'll put links to the various mods that we added, as well as some of the settings and tweaks that we did to the system to really make this thing fly. As you can see there, we're averaging just over 200 FPS in actual streaming gameplay. But enough of that, it's now day 12 and exploration would continue. I was not kidding when I said this thing was massive. We are talking hundreds and hundreds of blocks and multiple levels of depth to this thing. Spawners all over the place, dungeons, chests, resources. Things are starting to get a little bit full. And back to Inventory Manager once again. This is supposed to be the update of quickness, to be able to get ourselves right into the game. So we'd start burrowing down, get ourselves under the Y level 30 so that we can start the hunt for chromatic iron and vault rock. After coming across enough diamond, we go ahead and make ourselves an enchanting table and get things set up the way we want. Once again, the base coming around, making itself more homey. What this place really needs is some decoration, so we'd put up a couple of the banners we pillaged from the sand villages. And then, you guessed it, right back down to mining. I know, this is the fun part of the game right here, don't let anybody tell you otherwise. It actually wouldn't take long to go ahead and find some of this vault stone. Every one of these has about a 10% chance to drop a little bit of a shard, and it takes 4 shards to be able to make 1 vault crystal rock. We'll get a little bit more in depth as to the best way to go about hunting for vault stone and chromatic iron later, but just understand that the center of these veins for both appear at the intersections of chunk borders. Definitely worthwhile to turn those on in the minimap so you know where to hunt for the ore. With one half of the equation completed, we realized, you know what, it's time to set up a villager trading hall. I needed enchantments, and the best way to get a hold of the ones that we want is to spam that recycle button and change the initial starting trades for librarians. And we go ahead and set ourselves up a farmer and a fisherman so that we can go ahead and start generating some emeralds, because just because you get the trades, you can't lock them in until you actually trade with them, and that's going to take more emeralds than I actually had. If you're an old pro at this game, then you probably already know this, but if you're new to the Vault Hunter lifestyle, set yourself a keybind for cycle villager trades. Trust me, your wrists will thank you. There's a number of ways to make emeralds in the early game. I decided to go for a fisherman because I had a lot of these spider strings sitting around from clearing out around all of the various spawners that we found. Using a farmer isn't really as viable as it once was because we don't start with skill points, and that means we don't start out with twerking to be able to instantly grow our crops, so that's going to be a bit slower. In the very initial release here, I guess there was a bit of an exploit where one would be able to take a single piece of bamboo and turn it into quite a few number of sticks, which was a pretty good way, I guess, to make emeralds, but that has since been patched in the first update, the 002 release. I guess it's pretty game-breaking, but, you know, what are you going to do? I would instead double down on my string trade concept and decide to go ahead and make use of one of these cave spider spawners that we had nearby our base and go ahead and hollow this thing out and work towards building a spider farm. I hate these things. Really, really do. Spiders are gross. On day 24 now, we decide to go ahead and get some fresh air, take a break, go out, see the world, do a little bit of exploring, and see what's immediately available around our base for additional resources. For hundreds of blocks in any direction, this was the only structure that I could actually find on the map, and it appears to be some sort of a jungle temple. I've seen similar things like this on RL Craft, so I wasn't really surprised when I found some switches down here, and I knew that would mean there was some redstone and tripwire to be had. That dispenser at the end isn't fooling anybody. We'd sidestep and watch the arrow fly by, dismantle the trap, and the goodies can all be ours. I really do appreciate structures like this. They add a little bit of flavor and color to an otherwise vanilla experience, and they're just kind of neat to kind of break up the monotony of the normal gameplay. Adding a little bit of treasure and loot at the end is always kind of nice. Nothing game-breaking or fantastic, but kind of neat all the same. We'd return home from exploring and get back to the task at hand. It was day 26, and we'd spend till day 31 finishing out this spider farm. Really didn't want this to take as long as it did, but you know what? It happens sometimes. The biggest challenge I had to face was how was I going to move the ladder that I had dug all the way down to the very bottom that was running right through the center of the spawn area. So it took a little bit of ingenuity and reworking to kind of sidestep that and make another way around. But in the end, we got the spider farm working. It works. We can kill spiders. They can't hurt us. It's a win-win all the way around. That just means we need to get some better enchantments on our swords so we can maximize the potential output of this farm. No rest for the wicked, though. We would immediately spend the rest of day 31 back in our strip mine looking for chromatic iron. And while I haven't seen for myself, it's potentially possible that the latest update actually changes the spawning functionality of both chromatic iron and the vault stone to no longer have to bisect a chunk border intersection. But as of this first initial alpha release, it does. So that's where we found it. It was right here at a chunk border, and once we went to that method of farming, it really didn't take long. It was a couple in-game hours before we came across our first vein of it. We got 26 from the first vein. That's a lot of chromatic iron ingots. I had spent so much time underground I hadn't really noticed the state of affairs of our base, so I would spend a little bit of time doing some beautification. We needed to make this place presentable, really more representative of a actual true vault hunter. And we just can't have that when we've got gravel and cobble all over the place. So, time to clear it out and make ourselves a nice little spot to set up our vault altar with. Since we have a crap ton of all of this deep slate, why not go with it? And there, doesn't that just look so much more presentable? I think it does. We now have a nice little corner over here that we can go ahead and plop down our vault altar and begin our work on getting into the vaults. This place looks just about as good as any, so I think we'll go ahead and place this here. And you know, we kind of need to go a little bit fancy at this. I'm not satisfied with just a regular old lever to be able to activate this. I want to flex a little bit. That's right, we're going gold. Gold button. Yeah. And now that the altar is blinged out, let's go ahead and make some vault rocks. And wouldn't you know it, our very first one, while the requirements are pretty low, we didn't have 2 out of the 4 things we needed. No moss blocks and no dripstone. Well, the good news is there's a nice and easy way to be able to find all of this stuff. That's the nature's compass. All you got to do is know where the blocks are that you're looking for, what biome they're located in, type in the name of said biome, start search, and it will tell you where the nearest one of those can be. This particular one is less than 300 blocks away. That's pretty fortuitous. We'd burrow our way down there and find plenty of this pointed dripstone. I don't know why I didn't decide to light this cave up. I probably should have, just to spawn-proof it a little bit, because I'm sure eventually I'll need to come back here and get more of this, but we took just about a stack of this out, and that's one thing down. Now, mouse blocks, on the other hand, I knew I should have harvested some of those when I came across them out in the jungle areas, but the best way to find them is in lush caverns, and as luck would have it, we had one of those nearby us, also within 300 blocks, just in the other direction. We were getting pretty lucky here with our very first one. I took it as a good sign that this first vault was going to go well. So we would make our way over to the lush cavern, light things up, and begin harvesting some of these moss blocks. The addition of the Nature's Compass is definitely a bit of a game changer. While I love the quality of life improvements that we have, this one really kind of tops the cake for me. This makes it super easy to find what we're looking for, and honestly should alleviate days and days on end of searching for stuff by the sky. Which, if you haven't noticed, we haven't even really been into the nether, let alone the end, and we have no elytra. But, as it also happens, you can craft elytra. We just need a couple resources from the vault, which we are anxious to get started with. We'd return home with our moss blocks, complete this particular crystal, and we'd be well on our way. A few things as satisfying as getting to press the button. Oh, it's doing the thing! Yes! We did a thing! Crystal acquired. Well, with our first crystal in hand, we take a quick peek at what the next one was going to hold in store for us. Nothing really too crazy, although I don't have any glow ink sacs. So we'd sleep on it, we'd get ready, and prepare ourselves for the mental game of getting into our very first vault. I really wasn't 100% sure what to expect, so I prepared myself, brought a couple things along as we got ready to hop into here. I know, I probably should have watched a little bit more of the SMP, but you know what? Life happens, it gets crazy, and really I wanted to kind of keep some of the surprise for myself, learn as I go. Stepping into the portal, I was a little surprised to see that it didn't immediately break and shatter like I was accustomed to in 1.16. That's just kind of a little side effect, I guess, here of 1.18. Now, all crystals that are below level 10 start out with that beginner's grace modifier, which simply means if you die inside of the vault, you're going to leave and restart basically outside with everything that you had prior to going inside. You don't get any experience, and you don't get to keep anything that you found inside of the vault. This was a very particularly pretty looking vault. I love this geode theme sort of motif. It's pretty cool. We've got lavender and lilac colors all about. Really neat deco. We take a couple of the lamps for ourselves as well, and clear out our very first POI. Generally speaking, progress wasn't overtly difficult with the inability to be able to do waypoints, and I know you can do a game command and change that. I thought we'd go for the authentic playstyle here. Really no sense in messing it up, so we'd use torches to line our path so we'd know which way we went and which way we need to go back. I was a little bit worried about what it was going to take to break some spawners. I don't have anything overtly massive here, as we're rocking a diamond pickaxe with some efficiency on it for sure, but it was actually just barely enough to be able to break before the next wave would spawn, so we took that as a good sign that we were capable of handling just about anything we were going to come across in here. These points of interest are an interesting change of pace. I kind of like the concept of it, although the loot is relatively kind of bland and uniformed. Depending on what type of chest you have, wooden ones particularly, there's a very set amount of loot that you can get from them, and as you see, a percentage of chance that they can be trapped. I didn't know it now, but we actually would get incredibly lucky with this particular vault, and we'd come across our very first Omega room. Good old X marks the spot room. Now, in theory, there's no hostile mobs inside of any Omega room. This was not a challenge room, so there was no spawners about. You could take your time and prepare to set up to go down. I've cleared out tons of these in 1.16, so I felt somewhat confident that I knew exactly how this was going to go. We had our blocks ready to pillar up if it ended up being a not-so-friendly room, and we'd go ahead and hop in straight down the middle and see what we would get. I didn't realize that there had been some changes made to these. Initially, the biggest change that you'll note is that the walls don't disappear if you're up on any sort of a block other than standing on that floor of bedrock. I should have immediately taken this as a sign to be just a little bit more prepared and rethink my strategy here. I thought I was going to be able to get myself out of trouble. You know what? I had my blocks ready to go. We'd pillar up in case something happened. The walls come down, and immediately we'd start pillaring up. I'd recognize that this was not a happy room. I did not plan on mobs spawning directly on my head, let alone spiders, to be able to climb up anything that I was using as a pillar, and as luck would have it, it knocked me off. The only thing to really do in this situation would be to try to parkour my way around, lure everything over to one spot, and try to get back over to my pillar. Sadly, that did not work. I got hung up in the spider webs and turned into a piñata. No experience, no loot, back at the beginning in our base with the same gear that we had before. Beginner's grace. I guess it could be worse. I could have nothing, but man is this frustrating. Frustrations aside though, once you've had a taste of the vault, you want more. So we'd go about securing the glow squid ink sac that we needed for our next crystal. Didn't take too long, found one in an underwater cave, and we marked the spot on the map for later, should these things pop up again. That's another set of requirements down. We'd get to push the button, hear the happy noises of a crystal being generated. That never gets old. And we'd move on to the next. The next one needed a amethyst crystal, something that I didn't have, and I didn't think to loot from the very first vault that we were in. Not that it would have mattered, we didn't get to keep anything, and no, I'm not bitter about it. I did recall coming across a geode, though, while we were strip mining. I just had to remember where it was. Took a day or so to find it. And once we did, we marked it on the map for future reference, but harvested enough of these that hopefully we don't need too many more. We'd bring it back, add it to the altar, complete everything else we needed for this one, and we'd get to hit the button. I mean it when I say that this sound does not get old. Ah, yeah, that's the good stuff. Well, that's 2 down. Let's make 1 more because I got a feeling we're going to need quite a few of these things. What do we need? Well, that one's easy. This is all basic stuff that we had here in the base. We get this completed in record time, push the button, make another crystal. As you do, now we've got 3. We'd finished preparing the mental game for this next vault, and I gotta be honest, I was feeling pretty confident, even though we had a tragic, horrible failure. I chalked that up to just simply not knowing about some changes to the Omega rooms. I felt better this time around. The vault, to my surprise though, was not nearly as pretty. In fact, it was really kind of hellish looking. Fires all over the place, vault sand, etc. But while the themes may vary, the concept remains exactly the same. Points of interest marked all around. We'd had one here with a vault fighter, my very first encounter with one of them, and it was actually incredibly lackluster. He seemed to be kind of stuck and wedged up there on that trapdoor. That's fine with me. Easy kills. The ornate chests have a different set of loot to them. In fact, all the chests do. I know we mentioned it just briefly about the wooden chests, but between the wooden, living, ornate, and gilded chests, you can find different types of resources inside each of them. As it is, ornate chests focus a little bit more on metal sort of things. Iron ingots, vault nuggets, chromatic stuff. You can even find some vault alloy and ornate chest scrolls if you get lucky. We were moving along at a pretty good clip here, and I was starting to feel just a bit more confident, and we came across our very first ore pile point of interest. Now this particular spawner didn't exhaust itself, which meant it was going to have to be broken. And so far, we weren't having really any difficulty with that. Occasionally it would spawn waves before I could break it, but nothing that we couldn't handle if we took our time, pillared up, and stayed out of reach of the mobs that it was spawning. For the most part, this seems to be a pretty good general practice. The only time that it really ever poses any sort of a threat is when you get careless and you build your scaffolding or your pillaring too close to another structure where mobs can eventually pathfind and get their way up to you. I will say, going through the vault in this manner, at least in the early levels, it works, but it feels very cumbersome, like this isn't how things were intended. I suspect that that'll change once things open up, like, skill points and knowledge points, etc. As our gear gets better, we should be able to just kind of bull rush our way into some of these points of interest, handle the spawn and spawners, loot, and be out of there much quicker than we are with this pillaring. That said, I felt like I had found kind of the solution to everything here. We were getting pretty happy with the loot we were getting, found a wonderful piece of an unidentified vault helmet, our very first piece of vault gear, or at least it would have been, had we not gotten too close to the ledge there where the spawn was happening, got knocked off to near death, and then slain by a wraith. Yeah, if you're keeping track of the score at home, folks, that's 0 for 2 now. We take a peek at the interface, read up on all the wonderful things that we could have had we not been an idiot and pillared too close to where things were spawning. None of this really matters, honestly, at the end of it all, because we don't get to keep any of it. Beginner's grace, you get 0, bead buckus. You get to keep your stuff, but that's a small consolation. I tell you what, just visual frustration. There's no time to wallow in self-pity, though. It's right back into the vault for us. That's right, get back up on the horse that bucked ya. Hashtag real talk, though. I am very, very sad that it doesn't make the shattering noise when you go into a vault. Can we maybe get that in an update? That'd be super nice. Thanks. 3 vaults, 3 different motifs. This one's sand. And I realized that Mumbo's here. That's pretty cool. I didn't notice that before. I like it. Now, if you've noticed, we've not really been paying too much attention to the objectives. This particular one wants us to get 4 monoliths, and monoliths absolutely suck to find. What I was surprised to find, though, was this village. I absolutely love these rooms from 1.16, and I kind of wonder if they operate the same way. There's loot, there's chests. It was looking pretty promising. I wasn't sure if this qualified as an Omega room because there was spawners that did exist, but they were relatively minimal, and I thought I had read that Omega rooms did not have any hostile mobs at all. So this may be one of those weird crossover sort of things. I don't really know, but anyways, we'd pop on down to take a look and see what's under the city. It was at this point that it occurred to me, oh crap, I don't have an Eye of Ender should there be an end portal down here. I don't even know if that's a thing. As it turns out, this particular underground stronghold did not have an end portal. So we'll see if we come across another one, if that proves to be the case, but I've got to make a mental note to get an Eye of Ender. I don't even have any Ender Pearls yet. Now, there are a decent amount of living chests down here, and these type of chests tend to have, well, as one would expect, more organic things inside. Stuff like vault meat, poisonous mushrooms, bones, feathers. You can find components to make vault burgers, which, in turn give you more experience, so it's always worth looting these just to be able to get more experience points and being able to put more stuff into skills. We'd spread probably way too long down here as we're just not overtly prepared to be able to deal with stuff quickly. No vault gear, no vault weapons, just your regular vanilla stuff with some very mild enchantments. Speaking of enchantments, in case it wasn't apparently obvious, there are no offensive enchantments in this version of Vault Hunters. That means there's no sharpness, there's no smite. You're going to have to get vault weapons and then roll and hope that some of the innates or prefixes and suffixes apply some of those benefits for you. It's really more Diablo-ish than before, and I'm actually okay with that. I like the system of gear that we've got going for us. I know we left a lot of time on the clock in that vault, but we were sitting on a half a heart and absolutely no way to be able to heal back up. That's actually okay, because as we go through what we got for surviving this, while it was just a little over 1,500 experience points, that was enough to ding us at least 1 level, and that's going to give us 1 skill point to be able to spend into something. Probably one of the biggest lessons I've learned so far about these vaults is 1, don't get greedy, and 2, take what you can, where you can, and be satisfied with that because there's always another vault that you can go and get. But now that we've completed our first vault, we do some more interior decorating. You guys know I'm a little bit neurotic when it comes to this stuff. We need a dedicated space to be able to sort all of the loot and treasure that we're getting out of the vault, so that means, of course, we got to do a little bit of redecorating. I know, I get distracted by shiny things, but it's got to be done. I'd eventually spend some time and make this little nook of the base a little bit more interesting and flesh it out a bit more, but for now, this is going to work to be able to just kind of sort through and actually stop and take a look at some of this loot. Been trying to do a little bit of this in the vaults, but when you're under a time crunch, you can't really stop and read all of the descriptions. With the 1 skill point that we earned, there really wasn't much hesitation here. It's immediately going into the heal ability. Having that ability to be able to heal up and restore health inside of the vault is absolutely critical, and immediately once we got the skill, we went into our keybinds and we set up a key to be able to use it on the fly. Absolutely essential for being able to survive the vault, and hopefully not waste and leave time on the clock. That kind of felt bad. Confidence was growing though. We'd use our third and last one that we had prepared and hop back into another vault. This is now 4 vaults and 4 different unique themes. This one has kind of a lush gardeny sort of thing going for it, a combination of lush stone with moss and dripstone, all sorts of cool resources that the vault crystals ask for sometimes, so not a bad idea to loot some of these easy resources when you come across them if you've got the inventory space for it. I was starting to get the hang of handling some of these POIs as well. They really weren't overtly difficult, and there's not a whole lot of variation once you've seen a couple of the different configurations that they can be. I think honestly the hardest part in the early game is just simply knowing what to go after. And while the easy answer is to just say, well, everything that you come across, sometimes it can behoove you to be a little purposeful in what you decide to spend your time on. Case in point, these red and black chests that you see behind these zombies here, these are ornate chests. These are the ones that tend to deal with more metal sort of stuff. But if they ding, which means that they have a little bit of an upgrade to them, these chests can spawn in regular, rare, epic, and omega versions of themselves. They can have vault gear inside of them, including everything: helmet, chest piece, leggings, boots, swords, axe, shield. The whole gambit of unidentified vault gear is potentially available inside of these chests. And even if they don't have any of that, the actual resources that they offer are pretty good too, because it has a lot of the chromatic stuff so that you don't have to go mining anymore for it, as well as things like vault scrap, plate, ingots, alloy, etc. All sorts of good stuff that can be useful later on. That doesn't mean that these living chests don't have a purpose either. As we mentioned before, they can have all sorts of good stuff, including the components to be able to make vault burgers. I'm all about getting that experience. And speaking of experience, another couple things that I've learned here about the vaults. 1, it's okay to steal the decorations. Yes, I'm being completely serious. These things are cool. There's a lot of time and effort that went into the redesign of these vaults, and they've made them look just absolutely fantastic. So, pillage to your heart's content. Take some of these easy resources that otherwise would be a little bit of a pain to make in the overworld. The other thing that I learned while time was starting to run down here, and you'll see in just a moment, is that you can break the frame of the portal without actually breaking the portal. And this frame is made up of vault stone, which has a chance to drop those vault shards that we need for being able to make the crystals. It is absolutely worth your time to mine these things every time you come across them. Now the polished stone and the mumbo block, they're not going to drop any of it, but more than 60-70% of this frame is made up of the regular vault stone. And if you get lucky, like we did in this instance here when we were learning just about all of this, you can get sometimes 3 or even 4 of those little shards, which is enough to make an entire crystal. This saves you time in the long run because you're not having to go back and replenish your supply and find more of those resources underground. It's just a nice little habit to get into, honestly, and something that I will do with every vault going forward. And with 6 seconds left on the clock, we'd nope out of here. Obviously, we didn't get nearly as much experience points as we would have liked, but we did learn a lot of valuable lessons. We survived, we got experience, and we got more vault loot. And that's what it's all about. This is where we begin the rinse and repeat cycle of Vault Hunters. But there's always time for decorating, and we make time to place Mumbo in his spot of glory. Add a little decoration that we stole from the vault and really just kind of complete the scene. I love it. Fantastic. The last vault did give us our first piece of vault gear, a scrappy chest plate, nothing fancy, but we did put Unbreaking 3 on it, which is really about the only enchantment you can put on a chest piece. We'd also do a little bit of base expansion. The vault crystals were starting to ask for more complicated things, not really more quantity, just more variety. So it was high past time that we built a farm. So we hollowed out an area near our villager trading hall and started going to work on getting a farm up and going. Now in 1.16, the farm would have been one of the very first things that I would have put together simply because it was infinite emeralds and an easy way to get every enchantment in the game that you wanted, super early on. Here in 1.18, that's not really the case. We do a little bit of experimentation though. We'd make a couple vault burgers to get ourselves up to that next level so we could put a point in farming. Now farming is definitely not twerking. Twerking was way OP. Farming is a little bit slower, but it's actually not all that bad. It was definitely getting a bit of a bad rap on the Reddit and Discord, but honestly, once you figured out exactly how it worked, it wasn't too terrible. Essentially, you bind the key to your action button, and while you hold it down and you're channeling mana, every 3 mana points would tick 1 growth cycle of anything that was within range. The previous version of twerking would affect pretty much all the crops at the same time, where here it's systematic, it's one after the other after the other. So yes, it is a bit slower, but it does still work, and mana regen's relatively quick enough to make this still viable. You can make the yields on this even better by adding Fortune 3 to your hoe. When you harvest, as you'll see here in just a moment, the yields are pretty substantial. We ended up with more than double. We got 13 with just a regular iron hoe and 34 with an enchanted diamond hoe. The type of hoe doesn't really matter, it's really all about the enchantment. The current crystal wanted us to go find watermelon, which fortunately we have a jungle literally on top of our base, so it wasn't going to be too terrible to find it, but along the way we found this little guy, and we made friends. Man, friends are needy. They immediately need protection. Don't worry, little guy. I'll save you from this flaming zombie. There you go. Good boy. And because it is a jungle, watermelon were pretty plentiful, so we'd harvest a few of these up, bring some down to get going in our farm below, and be ready to pop it into the crystal. Yeah, I know, if I had Silk Touch I could get these whole, but I don't, so I didn't. Yeah. We would eventually get it, but just not now. Once again, we'd ring the bell, or push the button in this case for the happy, happy, joy, joy noises, and another crystal done. And just like an addict fiending for their next fix, it was back into the vault once again. Man, these things are addictive. Any day now. Any moment. There it goes. Oh my god, is this slow. Man, bring back the old way of doing this. I miss the sound. Seriously. And now we start to see some of the repetitiveness. We've got this broken hellscape theme going on once again. We get to working on the POIs. Definitely another lesson to be learned. I completely forgot that these altar chests are an absolute thing, and one of them requires that you have some levels. I did not level up from our spider farm before coming in here, did not have said levels to be able to get that, and didn't have any potions of enchanting to be able to get those levels. Live and learn. Always go in loaded. Another lesson to be learned, how to effectively do combat. Man, I just was not on my game here with the blocking, the pillaring, it wasn't going to work. We get ourselves backed into a corner, and actually this isn't a horrible strategy to be perfectly honest. If you can get away, get a little separation, and if you've got knockback on your weapon, it's relatively easy to keep things at bay. I only have knockback on my weapon simply because they took away all our other offensive goodies. I'm not really sold on it. It absolutely makes things a little more tedious, a little slower, because you're knocking stuff farther away from you instead of just absolutely confronting the issue. What was interesting is I did learn just a little bit there, I don't know if you noticed it, about line of sight. If I'm completely back in that corner, up on that ledge, they don't really pathfind to me and they don't come up. But you move just a little bit forward, they can see you and they start coming back towards you. Just be aware of your surroundings and what the pathfinding AI is trying to do. Well, this room is different. That's really all I can say about it. I don't really have much more. It's interesting. It's something unique that hasn't existed before. So yeah, it's a room, and apparently it's an Omega room because there's no spawners in here. There's no hostile mobs. I spent a long time going through this room trying to find out what made this Omega, what was super important about it. And aside from a couple chests hidden here or there around the landscape, and quite a few wooden chests on the inside of this tavern inn sort of thingy, there really wasn't much that I discovered. It made me feel like I was absolutely missing something, and I totally can be. If you guys know anything more about this room than I end up discovering, please let me know in the comments below. It feels just a little disappointing because I know a lot of work had to go into designing and building this, but at every turn that I looked, under floorboards, underneath trapdoors, places where I thought there could be little hidden goodies, there just was nothing. And honestly, I think this is what the big primary draw is going to be. These trader pillars that exist, I've seen these in some other rooms as well after this particular room. We'll see more in the video a little later on, but they have a chance to offer some really good, cool things for trades that are really probably pretty good deals. But again, another lesson learned, carry some vault gold and silver with you. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to take advantage of it when you come across these types of rooms. After spending a lot of time in that Omega room looking for secrets, we just simply ran out of time. The rest of the vault was pretty uneventful. We'd get out of there just shy of 1,500 experience. Not all that great, not horrible, pretty par for the course. It was back down into the hole to be able to get some more of the vault shards that we need to be able to make more crystals. No, I don't have a problem, you do. And yes, this is still the first vein of this vault rock that we came across. They're pretty massive and they'll set you up for quite a few crystals, that's for sure. Did somebody say crystals? I thought you did. We had everything we needed for this next one, and it was back to pushing the button again, doing the thing that we all love. Yeah. And that's right, it's right back into the vault. This time around, we'd take some time to actually investigate some of these ore piles. I realized we're not really getting a lot of ore, at least not at any sort of consistent pace, and it's not showing up really in any of the treasure chests. So it's going to have to be mined, at least as far as I can tell. So it's worth it to spend a little bit of time getting up into some of these places, which a lot of them tend to be suspended from the ceiling. But there you go. Make sure you mine it out completely and get everything that you need. And once again, we came across something interesting. It's a Mumbo Sombrero Cactar. That's cool, I guess. Pretty neat. What's not neat, honestly, is this room. I loved the Western theme room in the 1.16. This room is not an Omega room, it is a challenge room, which means there is just mobs and mobs and mobs to be able to handle, spawners all over the place. It can be a little bit difficult to say the least. So much so that I spent just an entirely way too long period of time trying to manage it and seeing if I couldn't get to the spawners to break it without having a vault pickaxe, without having any of the haste enchantments, etc. Efficiency just is not enough. So we'd opt for the next best thing. Loot, smash, grab, get out, survive. That's really what you gotta do sometimes. Now, while I didn't end up doing it, something that occurred to me during this particular clip here, it would be very possible to find yourself a position between two different POIs where both of them could be spawning, and the kind that don't just immediately exhaust themselves when they spawn, like these ones. Find yourself to set up a little kill chamber, a little pillar, whatever you like, and just kill. Spend the entirety of the vault killing mobs, and seeing what sort of experience yields that could return. It could be fairly lucrative, at least in the early game, for getting some of those much coveted skill points. Sadly, with only a couple minutes left on the clock, this was just something to fill a little bit of time before we broke the frame, gathered our goodies, and headed back home. 1,800 experience, though, that's definitely better than the sub 1,500 we were getting, and all of that because we padded the stats a little bit, getting up to 77 mobs killed. Not too shabby, honestly. For the record, mining ore does not give a whole lot of experience, but we need ore for a lot of stuff, so it's kind of a balancing act, I guess. Day 57 already, and we take a little bit of a break from the vaults. Not because we wanted to, but because the game forced our hand. It wants honey bottles. Can you believe it? Make me go out into nature. All jokes aside, the Terralith mod that adds to and replaces the Oh the Biomes You Will Go is really, really awesome at generating just some absolutely breathtaking and beautiful scenery to be had. Though I do suspect it is the root cause of many of the FPS issues that quite a lot of players are experiencing. It's a give and take, I guess. I honestly kind of prefer it over the Oh, the Biomes You Will Go. I think it just makes things look more streamlined and fitting, whereas the Oh, the Biomes You Will Go looked very disjointed with all the different types of biomes just kind of hodgepodged all together. We'd make it back home with 4 beehives in tow and start breeding up our bee population after sealing off the farming cave so that the bees can't escape throughout the labyrinth of the mine shafts. It might be a little bit overkill, but we should be pretty set for all of our honey needs and honeycomb needs, should they arise. We'd be able to make ourselves another crystal, and as we begin the dawn of day 60, it was right back into the vault. And honestly, it would be almost right back out. We would exhaust all the time in the vault, but there was absolutely nothing special or unique about this. It was just simply handling some of the POIs, cleaning out some treasure chests, and killing a few mobs. Just sub of 1500, not our best work, but you know what? I'll take it. Our overall vault loot pile is starting to grow, and that's nothing to scoff at. Though despite all that, I was not content. I wanted more, because we honestly need more to be able to build cool stuff, and cool stuff's going to make it even possible to get more. Yeah, so that's what we did. We did more vaults, we cleared out more POIs, we got more stuff, we broke the portal frames, rinse, repeat. Nothing too crazy or special in these couple of vaults here, but you know what? Every trip in was more experience, more resources. It all started to add up. Part of that cumulative adding up meant that we now had 2 points to spend on unlocking speed, and boy does this make a difference. Single-handedly, probably one of the best perks you could get. This is really going to speed up the time in the vault, allow us to view more rooms, get to more POIs, ultimately just be better at what we do. That is until the game throws a monkey wrench your way in another Omega room, one I've never seen before. This looks incredibly cool. It seems to have a choo-choo train somewhere, though I never found it. There is so much here to unpack and look at and explore. Once again, I just felt like I was missing stuff. According to the Discord, though, really the biggest draw of this room is what you're looking at here, these trading pedestals. Once again, unprepared, did not have enough stuff with me. That's alright, I'm taking this wall safe with me because it looks cool and I want it for my base. But that was honestly about the highlight of this room for me. That's kind of sad. So far, our Omega experience has not been, well, honestly, very Omega. It hasn't even really been epic. It's just kind of been, oh wow, that's neat. I suspect that might change in the later game. I hope it does. Day 70 and things are speeding quite along. We'd spend some time harvesting resources that we need, converting materials into other materials to be able to build some of the vault tools, as it were. We've got a forge, we've got a tool vise, we now have a recycler. We'd even end up with a thing here to be able to do armor, the artisan station, all sorts of cool stuff to be able to modify the gear that you have. Now, most of this stuff is for mid to late game. It's going to take an awful lot of resources to be able to do anything super cool with it, but we now had enough to be able to make our very first vault pickaxe, and it was right into the vise to be able to see how could we modify this for the better. Once again, resources are a little bit limited, but we were able to do 2 different upgrades. One, to improve the reach, and we got pretty close to the cap potential there of 0.7 with a 0.63. I'll take it. The other upgrade was to improve the mining speed. So we go from a base 10, which is just slightly better than the netherite pickaxe that we have, and that added another 2.1 to give us 12.14. Once again, I will take it. Every little bit helps, especially when you're in the vault trying to break those spawners. Probably need to invest more into that. So what's the first thing you do when you get a shiny new tool? Well, you hop into a vault and try to test it out. The game, on the other hand, had other ideas. Before I could even come across the spawner, I got ambushed by this horde of zombies, I guess. They just kept falling from the ceiling. This was something a little bit slightly different than what I'm used to. As it would turn out, these guys all accompanied an elite zombie. I'd heard about elite mobs, I just haven't actually come across any of them, and I'm not sure why now they decided to pick the opportunity to come on in. Maybe it's a level-based thing, maybe it's just all completely random. I don't know. There wasn't really anything overtly difficult about it. It's not like he shoots anything at you or has more increased reach than his shorter brethren. But this seemed to be the way to take care of it, and so that's what we did. I will say that the model for the elite zombie looks very suspiciously familiar to the parasites from RL Craft. I'm not pointing any fingers, but it's a welcome addition and a nice change of pace for things. As I would come to find out a little bit later, that guy was worth a lot of experience. But that's enough distractions. I want to test out our new tool. We'd find the nearest POI, clear out the trash, and get to work breaking the spawner. Oh my gosh, that goes so much faster. This, absolutely game-changing. I love it. And another vault completed. Let's see what the damage is. 3,400, almost 3,500. That is our highest to date, absolutely. And it really comes down single-handedly to that elite mob. As you'll see here on the screen, he was worth 1,400 experience points. And killing 83 mobs, nothing to really scoff at either. After spending a few days around the base doing some upkeep, we'd hop back into the vaults on day 78 and we'd find what looked like an Escall room. I think also referred to as the Lime Jello room. I don't know. It has a lot of blocks if you can get to them. They're a little bit of a pain. You got to pillar up. There's spawners, etc. But you know what? These ores are just a little bit more rare than they were in 1.16. So it's absolutely worth the time if you come across a room like this to get as much of this ore as you possibly can. There's a lot of recipes that require the third level tier, which is new in 1.18 of these gems, where you not only have to make the perfect, but then take 4 perfects to make it into an extraordinary level of the gem to be able to do the craft that you're looking for. Now, while having the bundle is nice, it is far from perfect. In fact, neither is the next set of upgrades that we're going to get, and that's going to be of pouches. Now, pouches basically replace danks in this version. And they have some interesting little benefits in that you can craft upgrades for them and insert them into the pouch like a module a lot sooner than you could potentially upgrade danks. For those that are familiar with danks, if you recall, you were going to need quite a lot of pogs to be able to do that. And here we are getting our upgrade to pouches well before we could even conceivably craft a pog, just simply because we have absolutely none of the gems necessary to be able to do it. Ironically, the recipe for a pouch does require the use of the bundle, but that's a small sacrifice to be had for much more room and much more customization. Pouches in and of themselves are not perfect, but they do allow you to set some items in there to be able to handle filtering, so that when you're back in the vault, you're doing your looting as you do, you can just swipe everything out of a chest, and then once you have stuff in your inventory, you can swipe through that and put it directly into your pouch, so long as you already have an item already set in there. There are other ways to be able to handle this. In fact, I've heard that a lot of people like having the magnet upgrade and just breaking the chest and picking stuff up off the ground to directly go into there. That's fine and dandy, and I think there's a couple other ways to go about doing it, but we're going to need some additional upgrades to be able to unlock that so that it functions the way that we want it to. That'll be something a little further down the road. For now, something a little bit more interesting, a bounty table. This is a fantastic update to 1.18 and adds another layer for you to be able to get some really good gear and materials early on in the game. It does cost a netherite block to be able to craft for the most part, but you'll get that after a couple of vaults once you're done upgrading other gear and spending netherite in other places. That really doesn't give you a whole lot of gain, to be perfectly honest. Right off the bat, we were able to complete our very first bounty because we had enough of the essences that it needed, and once we figured out how the interface worked, it rewarded us with a chest. Chest simply needs to be placed on the ground and then empty-handedly crouch to open it up, and that is now my new favorite sound in the world. This particular bounty also rewarded us with a couple of different axes. One would turn out to be just common, which is actually better than scrappy, so I'm really not upset about that. But the other one was a guaranteed rare, and this would actually end up being a nice massive upgrade actually over our netherite sword. I'll take it. Now vault gear you can still enchant with enchantments, just again remember none of the offensive ones, so putting unbreaking on this thing is still pretty important to do. It's going to make it last a little bit longer. We also had enough materials to be able to craft the second upgrade for our pouch, and that was of the stack upgrade, allowing 2 stacks of materials for the slots that we already have designated. It's about a 6-day time jump here, and it's day 91 as we get back into the underground. We are on the search for vault stone. Yes, we burned through all of the available shards that we had, making all the crystals that we did. All in all, I lost track of how many of them that we've actually completed, but I wanted to demonstrate what I felt is the best way to find this stuff. Basically, get yourself on a chunk intersection, and you're going to mine out in all directions so you can see in either way. Mine up for as high as you can, and down 7 blocks if you're standing on -48, and then mine in all the cardinal directions so that you can see. If you find no ore, then it's back up to -48, and you're going to move on to the next spot from there. This maximizes your view opportunity to be able to see in all directions, both up, down, left, right, north, and south. I just realized I said left and right when really that should be east and west, but I think you guys get the idea. Now you guys can tell from looking at the mini-map that we are focused only on these chunk intersections, and that's because as of the initial alpha release, that is where both chromatic iron and this vault stone is going to spawn, is at one of those chunk intersections and then branch out from there. Now supposedly this has been reworked in the initial update that's happened, the 002 update that was just released the other day. I haven't tested it myself yet. All of this 100 days was done under the initial alpha release, and we'll find out more in our next 100 days if that actually changed. For now, it's probably still not a bad practice to look at the chunk intersections just because it's handy, it gives you a nice point of reference, and it covers an awful lot of ground with minimal amount of mining necessary. Now that it's day 93 and we've got more of the vault crystals ready to go, I set myself an arbitrary goal of hitting level 10 in the vaults before the end of day 100. So that's what we sought after to do. I gotta say, I love this axe. It handles mobs pretty well. And with our speed increases, our mining haste increase, and our strength increases, handling vaults has honestly never been better. That doesn't mean it's not possible to get cocky, though. Hubris is the absolute downfall of all of us. I was no different. On my way out of this vault, I stumbled across this guy. Apparently, an elite spider. I am absolutely disgusted by this thing, and I realized that I was fighting it with just my regular axe and not my big axe. I might have saved myself this embarrassing situation of taking way too much damage and dying too. Oh my god, it spawned a whole bunch of little babies. Ew, that's gross. I'm not even upset that I died. Okay, I lied. I was pretty frustrated. I felt like I should have been able to handle that situation. That did not go according to plan. Ah! I panicked. What are you going to do? Well, I'll tell you what you're going to do. You're going to hop back into the vault. Get back up on that thing. It's day 95, and we are no closer, thanks to that loss in experience points, of getting to level 10. Not really a loss in points. We just didn't earn any for that one, and that was basically a waste. This particular vault spawned us with chunky mobs and a warehouse. Well, it'd take a little bit of time to research what chunky mobs was. That just meant 20% increase to health, which honestly with the axe is no big deal. But this room is kind of interesting. I actually never even came across one of these rooms in 1.16, though I always kind of wanted to because the paint cans and the various apparatus and the puzzle room down below all were things that I really wanted to try to experience, but we just never did before 1.18 came out. This being a challenge room because it spawns a crap ton of mobs, I thought would have something super amazing and awesome inside, and instead it had compressed blocks. Which, granted, I hadn't actually come across any of these yet. I wondered if they were even in the game at all, and I was sad to see that they were here. It was a lot of time handling that room for what I felt like was a very little payoff. I don't know. 2,000 experience points, though, gets us that much closer to level 10. Let's get right back into another one. Now, if I panicked before at the spider, I absolutely lost my crap when I saw trap show up here. I thought trapped was the same thing as locked. Yeah, it's really not, and I would learn that after I got out of this thing, but I went into full-on search and destroy mode trying to find these monoliths. I had only completed one other one before, and that was with 2 monoliths. Trying to find 4 was an absolute nightmare. It sucked, ignoring every single POI and running up and down and left and right and trying to cover just as much ground as humanly possible. I realize now I really needed to get Mega Jump and probably level it up to be able to more effectively handle everything. But we did it. We found the 4 monoliths, and we noped out towards the exit in record time. In fact, I think we left just about 11 minutes or so on the clock. I didn't even care. I was so relieved to get out of there. And then look. As we're scrolling through everything, and I'm looking to see how I got almost 5,000 experience points for doing that, I'd highlight over trapped and realize it's just a 10% increase to trapped chests. Well, forced tribunal by fire, I guess. It was a learning experience, and honestly, not a bad lesson to take away. Good experience to be had for completing the objectives. Maybe I need to reprioritize what I'm doing in the vaults. We'd get back at the bounty table, and we'd click on this completion bounty, and it would completely crash the game. So when we made it back in, we were able to finally re-roll it. I guess it was a known bug. I'm not sure if it got worked out in the most recent patch update. I hope it did, because it'd be kind of nice to be able to do some of those bounties. After learning the hard way that I can actually just craft mossy cobblestone when the vault demands it, we'd get back into another vault here. Eventually. Seriously, guys, if anybody from the dev team happens to be watching this, bring back the initial sound. I miss breaking glass walking into these things. It would seem this vault would have a little bit of luck on its side. Not only was it lucky chests, but it spawned with living, which meant that living chests can just appear anywhere. They didn't have to be in a POI. They could just be on the pathways. I should have treated this more as a let's zoom around and see if we can find monoliths and open up all of these living chests along the way, but I didn't end up doing that. We still got distracted by shiny rooms, or at least Omega rooms. We get another village. Now this one was a little bit different. It actually had an end portal and made me realize that I had forgotten that I realized I didn't have any Eyes of Ender. We'd need to remedy that before the next time, that's for sure. I missed out on an awful lot of booty there. But no time for lamenting now. It was off from booty and on to bounty. Let's go ahead and take a kill one. This one, not too bad. Vault fighters are pretty plentiful and we'd get 2 pieces of vault gear out of it. That's not a bad haul. So after activating the bounty, we'd make preparations to enter the last vault of these 100 days. As it would turn out, this would be just a plain regular vault. Nothing too crazy going on here, and we'd go about seeing what we could find. We did swap out for the axe for a vault sword. I'm a little bit more impressed with the sweeping action and the damage that this thing can produce. And honestly, after what happened with the spider and panicking, trying to choose between 2 different axes, which by the way, vault axes do not act like regular axes. They don't break wood hardly for anything. So having an actual sword on the hotbar, a lot less confusing, at least for me. Let's face it, I'm old, this stuff happens. Now what didn't happen this time around was me being forgetful, because after it happening twice to me, I wrote it down, and that's what you gotta do when you're old, is you gotta take notes, pen to paper style. We'd hop down under a mega town, and sure enough, it would have an end portal. Now so far the stronghold has been pretty flush with these living chests, so I don't know if that's just the normal way of things, or if there's a random chance of what sort of chest you can get when you complete this portal frame. But I ended up getting nothing but living chests. I'm not complaining, it's just kind of interesting, and I'm really curious to find out if that's going to be just simply the way, or if that can actually be gilded or ornate chests sometime in the future. Doesn't really matter because every one of these chests that you open up is that much more experience at the end. Speaking of which, we'd break our final frame of our last portal here and get ready to hop back through and see what the rewards of our spoils are. I don't think we have enough, honestly. With the loss that we took with that elite spider, that probably really kind of gimped the experience. And look at that, just about halfway of the way to level 10, not quite enough in total. That's alright. I don't think this has been unsuccessful, because if I look back at the 1.16 series, our first 100 days, we didn't even enter a single vault. Here, we've completed, at least 20, if not more of them, and I'll take it. This is a much faster way to get into the good stuff, and I'm happy with it. Thanks for hanging out with OldBeardedGaming. If you guys like what you saw, consider liking and subscribing on the video. Leave me suggestions and feedback in the comments below as always, and we'll see you guys again next time. Happy hunting, everybody. Take care.